Hello, welcome to St. Stephen's Online. Here's our talk from Sunday.
Good morning. My name's Thomas. If I don't know you, I'm just back from holiday, which was lovely. It was one of those moments that you learn the benefits of needing to slow down, but equally, and I'll even touch on it later in the sermon, the concepts of that. First off, an object in motion will tend to stay in motion. So I had to slow down on my holiday. But then now that I'm back, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. So I'm working on it. So if I look a little bit like I'm still on holiday, what a treat. But yeah, hopefully you've been enjoying the dynamic duos, the podcast, the sermon series, and hopefully you were able to check out Peter's talk from last week. I heard it was absolutely brilliant. I'm looking forward to checking it out on YouTube because it comes out today. But you can also listen to all the talks, whether they're on YouTube or the podcast as they previously went on before. But yes, there's something about Mary and Martha, their sibling relationship, their moment of working hard to kind of love the Lord and also sitting with the Lord. And I think I resonate very strongly as maybe an older sibling in that moment when there's that mild moment when Jesus is like, but your sibling's doing it right. And I was like, oh, there's that moment in reading it that I'm like, Martha's probably not happy with that. So I had the benefit of writing the scripts for these, so you're going to hear a little bit of overlapping themes in the midst of the Dynamic Duos podcast and what I'm preaching on today. But before we get to any of that, let me pray. Jesus, I thank you so much that you see us in the midst of all the things that we do and in the midst of all the things that we are. And I pray that this morning we can take a look at that, we can be in your word, and we can hear your voice. Amen. So the way I see it, and the way I'm sharing it this morning is when we look at Mary and Martha and their dynamic together, we see a basic look at service versus being. And I want to encourage, like I did, like I was able to share in the video, and like Mary and Martha shared in the video, working, like the doing, the being, the busyness rather, isn't bad. That's not like the evil here. It's not like one is bad and one is good. But between busyness and being, there's two thoughts I really want to lay out today. And it's, we need to look at the when we're doing it and the why we're doing it. So to start off with the when we're doing it, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, you can't pour out of an empty cup, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. Paul, in all that he was doing, in all that he had done in preaching and doing all that he was doing ministerially, he reaches a point where he says in Timothy 2, in 2 Timothy 4:6, he says that he's being poured out as a drink offering. That actually this concept of actually his ministry, his very life is being poured out for the service of the Lord. But this does come after the idea in Ephesians 3, and I'll read the whole bit, but a little bit will come up on the screen. And Paul says, I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide, how long, how high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge. And then he says that you may be filled to the measure of all fullness in God. So there's a concept of being filled by what God does in our lives, and then there's this idea about being poured out in that space. But the truth is, we can only pour out from what we're filled with. And this sounds really easy on one level. This sounds super simple. We get it. We really understand it. But in practice, I have to confess, I still get this wrong so much. And I'm willing to bet, without naming names or asking you to raise your hands, I'm not the only one. See, Martha saw all the things that needed to be done. She looked out, she said, there's so much to get ready, there's so much to do, And she was able to fill her time with all the good things that she had to do, and those were real. The work isn't fictional. It's not like she made up things to do. That was all real things that she needed to accomplish in order to kind of set the house, to do all the things. There's real chores, there's real bills to be paid, there's real tasks to do, there's real emails to send, and there's real calls to make. All these things are actually real. This isn't someone who is actually just in the kitchen. I kind of could imagine Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus while Martha's in the kitchen, like banging pans together to just make it look like she's really busy. And then being like, why don't you give me attention? This isn't that moment of the tasks are not useful. Martha was really sacrificing through her service. So why was Jesus seemingly harsh with her? Well, Jesus seems to give Mary this figurative pat on the head, right? This Mary's doing the good thing. Martha, you should have paid attention more. And oftentimes we can look at that and go, why was Jesus so hard with Martha? But actually, we do need to look at the when things were being done. And it's really easy to take this out of the spiritual metaphor of being filled and being poured out and actually be able to see it so clearly in the physical. So, I have a picture here, right? You all see the picture. Just make sure. Can I pour someone a glass of water? Joe, are you thirsty? Could I pour you some water? Well, here, I'll pour it now and I'll fill it up later, okay? Right? Like that tangibly ridiculous. Thank you for playing along. But that's not how this works. Like, I can't be like, I'll give you all some water. It's okay. I'll do the task now. And later, I'll find time to fill up the cup. I'll find time to fill up the pitcher just in a bit. While that is ridiculous with an empty pitcher in my hand, I can't tell you how many times I did that in my life. When I'm like, all right, I'll get done all my tasks I need to do right now, and later I'll sit with Jesus. Later I'll be filled by him. I'll do all the things I need to do. I'll get them out of the way. I'll twist it so it looks really good. I'll get them done so I can have more time with Jesus later. But that is just as ridiculous as me going, let me give everyone some water now. And when I've got around to everyone, then I'll fill up the pitcher. See, this is where Martha found the challenge. It was in her living room sat the fountain of living water. And she was doing good things, but she had yet to be with the one who would fill her up and satisfy her soul so that out of his overflow, she could do the ministry, the service, the love. For Martha, she was used to doing it all in her own strength, or actually maybe with a little help from Mary, if I'm being honest. It seemed like she was assuming that would be something that came along. But what Jesus invites us into, what Jesus was inviting Mary into and Martha into, is not this idea of there's tons of work to do and there's time to rest. It is, there's a source that all things can flow from. Do we sit with the source first? Choose the good portion, as the ESV says, or choose the one thing that's necessary, as the NIV puts it. And then from that place, find what we can do next. Because the truth is, I feel in this room, there's probably a lot of Marthas like me. There actually might be a few people in this room, because I can also do this. You know, it's lovely. I can mess up 1,000 ways. It's brilliant. Because I also mess up this way occasionally too. I will sit at Jesus' feet to be filled, and I won't get back up again for a while. Now, don't get me wrong, that sounds really altruistic. That sounds, isn't that beautiful? But the truth is, we are filled for a purpose. We're filled for a reason. First reason we're filled is because he loves us. It's a brilliant reason. But the second reason we are poured into is that we can then pour out for others. So, as much as I can be Martha and get it wrong by being busy and eventually schedule in my time to be filled with Jesus, I can also sit down at Jesus' feet and go, I don't want to get up again. Because like I said earlier, and Newton put it as his laws of motion, an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted on by an external force. And an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. I am that object. You also might be too. No judgment. That outside force is always Jesus. So there's a balance in this. And it ends up being this beautiful cycle. Because ultimately what we're called into is to sit at Jesus' feet, be filled, get up and serve, and return to be filled. This makes the when really important in the Mary and Martha story. Because if you're looking at one point versus the other, actually Mary and Martha are both showing us good things. But the lesson we need to learn from their dynamic is the when. And I want to encourage you, this is an aside that's not really in my sermon, but I just want to encourage you, you will often see people doing it better than you. There will be people that just either are in a season where they're nailing it, they are like filled with the Lord, and you're like, it's good for them, I guess. Or you'll be seeing people who are out serving the Lord, and you're like, but I just want to stay here, Jesus. I don't want to go do anything. I know this because this is, again, how I get it wrong. But the other thing that the enemy would love us to do in that scenario is not only comparison, which ends up being really detrimental to our relationships with each other, but also just wallow in condemnation. Why did they get it right and I get it wrong? Where Jesus, in the midst of the conversation with Mary and Martha, is not condemning Martha, he's inviting Martha. He's saying there's plenty of room next to me. And when we see someone getting it right, we should celebrate them and realize that their success is an invitation for us to draw closer to the Lord. The next thing that kind of comes up, we're actually going all the way back, but the secondary thought that comes up in the midst of Mary and Martha's conversation is the why. Why is Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, and why is Martha doing the work? And actually, when we look at that, we can see that actually it says really something interesting in the text. In verse 40, it says, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations. Distracted? And then in verse 41, Jesus then, when talking to Martha, says that she is anxious and troubled. One of the things that I've found out in my life, just looking into my spirit, sitting down sometimes, is there's often times that we as people busy ourselves because sitting still is scary. We continue our actions. We find new things to do because if we were to stop, we would actually have to listen to our own hearts and the Spirit of the Lord. Work, even good work, even God's work, can end up being a distraction to us and keep us from sitting in with Jesus. And in this case, can stop us from focusing on actually what we really need to focus on. Busyness can give us a sense of control when we feel things are out of control, and can give us a sense of achievement when inside we might feel like we have low worth. Busyness can be a distraction from what God might tell us if we dared to sit still at his feet. At Focus this year, there was a speaker named Tyler who spoke on something very close to this. And he shared this quote: "The truth is, busyness is some of our best subconscious strategies for avoiding reality. When we slow down, we are often left with the chaos of our inner lives. If we want to watch the sunrise, though, at some point, we are going to have to sit and stare into the stillness of the dark. If we are busying ourselves, it's always a good habit to ask, am I avoiding time with the Lord?" Now, to end with this slide, when we see Mary and Martha next, after this moment, after the reading today, we actually find them in John chapter 11, but this time, the person to run out in faith and knowing that Jesus' presence is of utmost importance, the one who runs out to greet Jesus first is Martha, not Mary. Martha's not the villain of this story. And she gets it. She learns from her experiences here. She heard what Jesus was saying about actually put down the ladle and come sit at my feet. So to end, coming back to Newton's first law of motion, I bet you didn't know you were getting a science lesson today. But an object at motion tends to stay in motion, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. I wonder if busyness is your default. Can you let Jesus bring you to rest at his feet? If you find you're trying to avoid your own inner thoughts, the silence that might come up, or the conversation that Jesus might actually want to have with you, if you find yourself busy to avoid that, you have to let Jesus interrupt you. But that being said, if you find that you are staying still, not moving what God is calling you into, and you're calling it just being at Jesus' feet, then actually you probably need to let Jesus be the force that spurs you into action. So if stillness has become an excuse, you need to let Jesus nudge you into action. And whether it's getting sequences wrong and needing to put the first things first, or whether it's needing to allow ourselves to be in the still and the quiet, even though it's intimidating, I highly recommend realizing that that sequence of being filled, sitting at Jesus' feet, being filled, pouring out, and then returning to be filled. This can be a weekly, a daily, an hourly cycle. But it leads to a deep and rich relationship with Jesus. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you that there's room around your feet for all of us. And I thank you that you invite us to come and to receive from you so that we're not pouring out from an empty vessel. Lord, I pray that you give us opportunities and the desire to sit with you more this week than we did last week. But equally, Lord, I pray for the opportunities, for the nudge to be able to pour out for your sake in our day-to-day lives. Whether it's at the jobs you've called us to, whether it's the families we have, whether it's just in the space of the friendships we have, or whether it's a ministry or a volunteer position we have, Lord, let us pour out for your kingdom this week from the overflow of what you've poured into us. And let us choose the good portion, the one thing, to start our days. And let us see relationship with you as not something we get around to, but as something we need to start with. Amen.
Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and we hope you'll join us again soon.